All right, I do want to welcome everyone for joining us here. Looks like we got folks still logging in. I'll give folks just a couple more moments. I want to thank you all for joining us here today. We are here to discuss our Explorer application. This is a foundational course really designed for those with maybe some prior experience using EagleView technologies, but certainly I want to give folks the opportunity to kind of get introduced to the platform. Yeah, we'll just get started here in just a moment. Okay. Okay, let's get started here. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. We'll get started a couple minutes after there. That is not me. That's Samantha. That's my great colleague. That's me. My name is Brandon Kotler. I'm going to be your technical trainer today. Appreciate having the time to discuss our platform here. Again, a lot of folks here on the call today. Want to give everyone the opportunity to chime in with any questions you might have. Please feel free to utilize that chat box feature that can be located there in the Zoom application. I'll do my best to attend to those questions as they come along. So with that said, if you do have access to that chat box feature, excuse me, perhaps you could tell me how much, if any, experience you have with EagleView technologies, utilizing any of our applications or software. Please confirm how we get the Zoom recording of the session. Thank you, Andrew. This session is being recorded. I believe I've been in correspondence with Steve Lopez. I'll make sure to provide him with that recording at the conclusion of our training. Hopefully we'll get that to folks. If not by the end of the day today, hopefully by the end of the week. Sometimes those recordings take a little longer. Okay. And that's my good friend Samantha. She won't be joining us today. All right, so a little bit about EagleView itself. So it looks like we got some mixed experience. We got some folks who know experience, some who've been using it. Chris Webb has been using it for 8 years now. Only cursory experience. I use it regularly. I find it very helpful. All right, appreciate the kind swear there, Sean. So for those of you who are completely new to EagleView, I'm going to at least give you a little quick overview as to kind of how we go about acquiring our imagery, because as an end user, this is going to be pertinent to you. So all of the imagery within the Explorer platform is captured by our fleet of single and dual engine aircraft, similar to this little kind of cartoon plane we see here. Now, while that plane is flying over a region, an area, a county, it's kind of doing so in this like back and forth, like a lawnmower fashion, covering all of the surface area of the ground below. While that plane is in flight, there is a camera rig which is fixed to the belly of the plane. And within that camera rig, there are different cameras which are resulting in different types of imagery that you as an end user will be able to engage with. Now, one of those types of imagery is the ortho or the orthogonal, which is a top-down orientation, and that is basically a 90-degree bird's eye view of the ground below. This is going to be very useful when applying GIS data, because that GIS data, that symbology is often tailored to that two-dimensional top-down view. It's also be very helpful when conducting two-dimensional measurements, such as distance or area measurements, or when looking at the footprint of respective structures, kind of get that initial assessment. In conjunction with that top-down orientation, we also have different cameras mounted at the different cardinal positions, which are taking slightly angled images, what we refer to as the obliques. Those obliques are going to result in an image that's at about a 40 to a 45 degree angle, And that's going to show some depth to the imagery. That's going to allow us to see the facades of structures. So perhaps in that top-down vantage point, we see a single-family home with a metal roof. Well, then we toggle to that obliques and we say, oh, it's a 3-story structure. Oh, is that a carport or a garage? It's going to allow us to really kind of open up the vantage point of our imagery, and then we can actually toggle and adjust that imagery to those different angled orientations. So literally, we can get a 360-degree vantage point of a structure, of a plot of land. Maybe we're planning some future projects. And so that we're able to make highly accurate and informed decisions using this high resolution imagery. Now, in addition to having all of that imagery available to you, all of that imagery is also geo-referenced. So when we're referring to geo-referenced imagery, basically what that means is that for every single pixel of imagery that we engage with as an end user, every single pixel has been attributed a lat, long, and elevation data point. Those coordinates are attributed to each pixel of data. So that's going to result in two helpful things. First, you're going to have the opportunity with confidence to know whatever you're looking at on planet Earth, that's where it is in the Explorer application. So everything's going to be in direct scale. You see two structures next to each other. That's how close they are if you went in person to view it there. So everything is going to have that real world accuracy. And because each pixel has those lat long data points, we're able to conduct highly accurate and consistent measurements between two pixels within the image viewer. So kind of a little tip, the more zoomed in you are to the imagery, the more accurate those measurements are because we're measuring from those specific data points. So as an end user, a lot of opportunity to really fully utilize the breadth of imagery as well as some of those measurement tool capabilities. Okay. So again, we kind of have a mixed group today. We have a large group. I appreciated that because hopefully, no matter who you are, you'll walk away with some helpful, useful information. Starting with, we're going to talk about navigating and comparing our imagery. We're going to go into interacting with some of that GIS data. And I realize different roles are going to have different priorities. Different roles are going to focus on different capabilities of the platform. I'm going to do my best today, kind of introduce you to everything. And then what you think will work for your day-to-day workflows, by all means, keep practicing that on your own. Measurement and annotations. Now, for those of you who do have experience in Connect Explorer, this measurement and annotations is going to be the biggest learning curve. It's kind of the biggest difference between our Connect platform and our new cloud platform. Once you get the feel for it, it's rather intuitive. It just kind of looks and feels a little different, but we're going to cover that today, as well as various exporting options. Now, this is a web-based application, so I'm logged into Google Chrome today. That is my preferred web browser. We also encourage folks to use Mozilla Firefox or Microsoft Edge. For those of you who are fans of Safari or Internet Explorer, a little bit older, a little bit dated, we encourage folks to get those newer web browsers, so I'll be using Google Chrome. And because this is a web-based application, we are going to discuss some of the exporting options where you can download imagery and key pieces of information, which then you can readily share with others who maybe don't have those EagleView login credentials. So be it if it's a homeowner, business manager, maybe just a constituents in the county, within the planning commission, you'll be able to share information with them as well. And again, I want to encourage folks to utilize the questions as they come about. So as of right now, I'm going to switch my screens here, and I am going to share my web browser screen. I'm going to turn off my video as well, as I like to have the imagery be the star of the show. And this is, again, I'm in that web browser. I just personally, for training purposes, I like to be in the full screen view. So I'm just going into my Google Chrome 3 dots and full sizing my screen here. Now, I am logged into your account today, so all of the imagery as well as all of the GIS layers which have been accounted for are going to be mirrored in the account that we're looking at today. And this should look like a somewhat familiar structure, 160 Main Street in Haverhill. So let's start with some basic introductions to the platform. And again, please ask those questions as they come about. For those of you with prior Connect experience, you might notice this is a little bit of a sleeker, a little bit of a kind of a slimmed down UI engagement piece where we're looking a lot more at our imagery, less menus, less kind of tools on the screen itself. First thing I want to point out is our mouse cursor. By default, that mouse cursor is going to be kind of that gloved white hand. And I'm drawing attention to the shape of our mouse cursor because that's going to be important in a little bit. Now, for basic navigation, and right now this is that top-down orthogonal image, so we can see clearly the footprint of our current structure, as well as our various cars parked in the parking lot. Now, if I wish to change or pan the image, change that initial location, I'm going to click and hold the left button on my mouse. Notice now my hand is grabbing, I'm pinching the imagery, and that's going to allow us to pan over to the rest of the imagery. Now, as we pan over, rather than having blank space on the peripheral of each image, it's kind of has this cascading fashion where we are continuously engaged with that imagery, even when we kind of pan out of view there. And that's simply by clicking and holding the mouse. Next means of navigation is the means to zoom in and out. Now, our navigation controls and connect used to be in the upper left corner. Well, now our navigation controls in this version of our aerial image viewer is located in that bottom right corner. Helpful tip, in addition to the shape of our mouse icon, whenever we hover over an actionable button in the platform, it's going to display a little gray title card telling us what that respective button does. So if I wish to zoom in on the imagery, I'm going to click on that little plus in the bottom left right corner. And inversely, if I wish to zoom out, I can click on the minus. Now, I also am using a mouse with the scroll wheel, and I can use that scroll wheel to zoom in and out as well. Can I scroll down? Oh, Harry, you beat me to it. Yes, you can use that mouse scroll wheel. Absolutely. So between the panning and then the means to use that scroll wheel on your mouse, very intuitive, very easy, all at the right at your hand, right at your fingertips. So panning, navigation, we can do all of that with our mouse. We want to keep our attention in that bottom right corner where we have our compass. And the compass is going to provide two key pieces of functionality. The first is the center button in the compass. Notice when we hover that mouse cursor, it says switch to oblique. So by using that center button in the compass, this is how we're going to toggle between the oblique and ortho imagery. We can see now that we're in the obliques, we can see the facade of our respective structures, including that this is a 3-story structure right here. So functionality number one is using that center button to switch back and forth between our ortho and our obliques. Now, notice that when we are in the obliques, we have these little wedges that are kind of on the perimeter, kind of in the orbit around that center button. And notice that when we hover over one of those respective wedges, it's telling us from which vantage point clicking on that wedge will take us. So perhaps I want to view this from that west-facing orientation. I can do so. Same as if I want to click on the south. Maybe I want to view this from the north. So the second functionality of our compass is to change the orientation of that respective camera angle. Why would compass have red circles with line and not functioning? Why would my compass have a red circle with line and not functioning? Suzanne, I don't know what you're looking at. Please also make sure that you are in cloud, not connect. I know in connect that compass does have like a red arrow on it in the upper left corner. Otherwise, maybe you could send me a screenshot. I can't speak to the red circle and not functioning. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Again, using those wedges to change the different orientation of the oblique imagery. But also one thing that is new to cloud is notice that when we're in that top-down ortho, more often than not, in image viewing softwares, when we have an image like this, the top of the page is north, south, east, and west, kind of like we're looking at like a road map or an atlas. And that's true initially in cloud, whereas we have this little blue arrow, which is going to designate and point to north. But what we can do is we can click and drag and actually change the orientation of that ortho imagery. So we're not just bound to say that the top of the screen is north. We can actually just rotate so it can best meet our viewing needs. So that is some of our key functionality there. When it comes to navigating the imagery, Now, next thing I want to point out is, and we're going to just kind of move in a clockwise fashion. So we start in our bottom right corner, we have our navigation controls. Then front and center of our screen, we have our date selection pane. And by default, it's going to tell us the year or the month of that captured imagery, as well as in a little bit smaller gray font, the specific date of that image capture. Now, because every time we conduct a flight, be it if it's a seasonal flight, maybe we flew in the spring or we flew in the fall, but every time that we conduct a flight, it is cataloged within your historical repository of data. So basically what we can do, this is going to allow us to really kind of go back in time where we have some previous imagery. And all we need to do is click and it's going to upload that base layer of imagery. So very simple, very intuitive. It's literally front and center of the application to change that base map, that base layer of imagery. Let's continue in our clockwise fashion to this little white tab that we're going to have on the very left side of our interface. And when we click and expand that little white tab, what we're doing is we're opening up our Views Gallery. And the Views Gallery, this is a new feature. This is exclusive to Cloud. And what this is going to do is this is going to provide us with a little thumbnail preview image of the available imagery that we have at any given vantage point. Now, this will kind of show you the individual image capture. When we are in the platform itself, we're going to kind of see these images stitched together. But as you're planning, maybe we're kind of looking through and we want to have an image that best centers or kind of has the orientation, just the center building where we need it. We can select that. We can also use our Views Gallery kind of in that compass capacity to change the orientation and then preview the available images from that respective orientation. And that is our Views Gallery. So those of you familiar with our Connect Explorer platform, we had the little image carousel, which basically was just a number that told you how many images were available. Well, now instead of just having a number, we're showing you the images that are available. And again, that is available in the Views Gallery. And we can close that Views Gallery at any time by clicking on the Collapse tab here or clicking on the X in the upper right corner of that respective feature. Any questions regarding those main pieces of navigation, namely our navigation tools in the bottom right corner, the means to select our date selection pane, and then our Views Gallery. Any questions thus far? What was user view in the gallery? You mean user layers. So user layers are kind of get to this. This is kind of more of an advanced feature, which is still getting flushed out. But when we conduct measurements and annotations, uh, this will keep track of those measurements and annotations. For those of you with experience with Connect Explorer, you can think of user layers as kind of the newer version of workspaces. Not quite as fully flushed out just yet, but with future releases, that's going to get further advanced upon. So we'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But great eye, Harry. Appreciate that. Okay. All right, at this time, let's keep on moving in our little tour here, and we're going to go to our upper left corner where we have our address search bar. Now, one thing that I am a big fan of is just how streamlined this interface is. There's a lot of intentionality as to what we're viewing as an end user. So when we want to go to a new location within our area, we're going to click, and that's going to expand the address search bar. So again, we're really kind of optimizing the imagery engagement itself. Now, once we expand the address search bar, you'll see kind of in that faded text, that faded font, what parameters we're searching for. So right now, this is set for address or lat long. Now, we do have these little dials here to the left of the data field, and based on how your images or how your GIS data was configured, we can search by some of this additional information, be it some of these parcel data numbers for the respective counties, the respective towns within the area. So I'm just going to kind of keep this at the generic address lat long, so I can use coordinates as well. And one quick note I want to make, in addition to having our configured searchable layers here, our address search bar here is a smart address search bar. And what I mean by that is we've given it some similar capabilities to what you would have if you were going to a Google search, in that it will remember recently searched for locations. And it also allows us to give us a little bit more flexibility. So rather than putting in a specific address, we can put in a landmark. We can put in a street name. We can put in a particular structure if it has a particular name, so it has a little bit more of kind of a smarter search capacity. Also, notice that much like with a Google search, I'm going to start typing in an address. Notice that as I start typing in that address, it is starting to auto populate and suggest to me what that full completed address might be. Just like if we were going into a Google search, who was the first president of the United States? Well, by the time we get to the who was the first pres, we're probably going to have a pretty good idea of what that location is. So I'm probably going to put in a little bit more, but sure enough, there we go. That is the address I wanted to. I typed in about half of it. I'm going to click on the address, and it's going to take us to our next location. It's going to toggle into our oblique imagery. When an address search is conducted, it'll take us to that location. The location itself will display a little title card telling us what that address is, as well as our little red marker. It's going to display the coordinates, which can be instantly copied by clicking on our little copy icon right there. So if I was so inclined, I could take that copy icon or take those lat long coordinates and then conduct that search using the lat long coordinates as well. Now, when that search is conducted, I have this title card and I have this kind of, it's not a formal property boundary outline. It's more of an approximation based on EagleView as to where those property lines are. I'm going to trust, or I would encourage you to trust your own parcel data when it comes to those official boundary outlines. But in either case, I want to get rid of it. I want to minimize all those extra things. So I'm going to click X to get rid of the title card. And then I'm going to go back up to my address, click the X. And by clicking that X, we've cleared that search. In clearing that search, we got rid of the little red marker as well as the blue property outline. And I'm going to go one step further and I'm going to collapse the address bar. Again, I like having that full screen, really soaking up all that high resolution imagery. All right, so now that we're at our location, rather nice part of town, rather nice pretty house here, kind of viewed from different orientations. And what I want to do now is show you one of our specialized tools, especially for those of you who might want to track changes over time for a particular area. Now, all of our tools, and you can see I'm signed in here in your account. So as a trainer, that's different. You won't see this in the upper right corner. But what you will see is the stack of these cascading tiles here arranged vertically in the upper right corner. And if we're not sure what a particular tool is, just hovering that mouse cursor over it is going to tell us what that particular tool is, including our dual pane tool. Now, when we click on the dual pane tool, and this is the similar functionality as to what we had in Mechanic Explorer, it's going to open up two panes of imagery. Now, by default, these two panes are linked navigationally when it comes to if we pan on one image, that's going to be reflected on the other. If we zoom in on one image, that's going to be reflected on the other pane. However, as you'll notice here, we have one pane in the ortho, one in the oblique, because the navigation pane or the orientation pane, that is going to remain independent. But that's going to allow us the opportunity to view maybe from two different vantage points simultaneously, and also the opportunity to view in that top-down, the ortho and oblique, and kind of view the same orientation, but from different vantage points. So that's one helpful thing with the dual pane tool. But then another cool trick I want to show you is notice that each dual pane tool also has its own date selection pane. So perhaps I'm going to keep this one on the left side for that April 2025, but maybe we're going to go back in time a little bit to April 2020. And now we can start seeing changes to properties over time. So we can see here we added a shed, we added a pool, we added a playground. Seems like we made a couple nice upgrades there. It might be easier to see, really stand out if we put in that top-down orientation. So again, if our duty is to track changes over time, this dual pane tool might prove quite useful. So perhaps we are getting to assessment season and we're reassessing property values and, adding an outdoor pool, an outdoor shed, that's probably going to increase the property value. So maybe we want to have this on file. So what I want to do is export this as a PDF file. To export imagery, we're going to go to our export button. Again, and that tool is located in the upper right corner. When we click on the export tool, it's going to give us the opportunity to name this image. Now, as a best practice, we encourage either using the parcel number or the address, anything that's going to be a unique qualifier. So for this, maybe we'll give it those lat long coordinates. Then we also have our format in this drop-down arrow, which is going to give us 3 different options of how we want to download this file. Now, this is, if we selected JPEG, no additional options. If we selected PNG, no additional options. But if and when we select the PDF, notice that now we do have the option to do this as either as 2 single images or as a merged single page document. And that's what we want because we want to really demonstrate that before and after contrast, kind of like with like weight loss photos or renovation photos. Kind of having that before and after can really provide an inspiring contrast. Now, a little helpful note to remember this. When this PDF option is really going to work best suited for the dual pane. So whenever you're looking to export imagery from dual pane, which has a D in it, think PDF, which also has a D in it. So then we're going to go ahead and click on the blue export button. And then I am going to go down to my downloads. And I am going to, there we go. So now I have my downloaded PDF, and this is going to be at whatever orientation or zoom level, whatever vantage point I was engaged with as an end user. It's going to have the title, the address, or here the lat long coordinates, and then it's going to have the date capture for each respective image. Because this was downloaded on my machine as a PDF, this is something which can be emailed out to a homeowner. This can be uploaded to a central repository of other assessment information, or maybe we can even put this on the website if we're so inclined. But it's going to give you a lot more functionality once it's downloaded on our respective machine. Back to my full screen. And then at any time, we can close out of that dual pane tool by simply clicking on the dual pane icon once more. It goes back to that single image viewer. Any questions or use case considerations regarding dual pane tool? Can the link button be? Yes, so that was a good eye. So when you're exporting, you notice that there's a share link. So this is going to be really beneficial if it's another internal user, because that link isn't going to work unless the other person has a login credential. So Harry, maybe you're looking to collaborate with Suzanne and you just want to, hey, take a look at this cool property. That's an opportunity where you could just copy that link, send that to her in a Teams message or an email, and then by clicking on that link, then Suzanne would have access to that as well. So kind of sharing link is more for internally sharing, whereas that exporting image is going to allow you to share it with those outside of an EagleView user account. Great question. All right, so at this point, let's go to our next location and look at some more functionality tools, some cool stuff here. So I'm going to go back to my address search, and this time I do want to search by a parcel number. So I'm going to go specifically, I have a Haverhill parcel here, and I'm going to paste that information. And so we have our specific parcel number, and by uploading and searching by parcel, we're able to find that location. Little bit of warning here. If you enter a parcel number, but you're searching by a different area or you're searching by the address not long, it won't follow that search. The computer, the program won't know what you're looking for. So just be mindful when searching by parcel numbers, you have the appropriate parcel data in the viewer. And I'm just going to kind of pan out a little bit. We're here at a different part of town, and I'm actually going to remain in this top-down ortho vantage point because I want to talk a little bit about our GIS capabilities. And I'm just a big fan of displaying the GIS in that top-down vantage point. I think it's a little bit cleaner. It's just a nice rendering. So when it comes to our identify or our GIS tools, all of that is going to be located here, again, in that vertically tile tools. And the third from the top, which is our layers. And when we click on the layers, we have three tabs displayed: our layers, our legend, and our identify tool. Now, the first is the layers. And from here, you'll see a couple drop downs, maybe with some default, maybe with some roads. But any and all of these respective layers, this is going to be that symbology. Haverhill, Haverhill, Haverhill. I'll practice that. Appreciate that, Chris. Thanks for looking out. I appreciate that. Well, let's turn on some of those Haverhill layers. There we go. So by clicking on the respective layer, that symbology is instantly displayed on top of that base layer of imagery. Maybe we add some of the street information as well. And just kind of like, I like to think of GIS as bedding, in that our base layer of imagery is our mattress. And then we can cascade and display those respective GIS layers here at any time by simply clicking on it. And then it's going to kind of like sheets overlay on top of that base layer of imagery. Whatever layers that we turn on, once they are turned on, that will be displayed in the legend, which is kind of like that key, which is basically, kind of giving you reinforcement as to what that symbology is referring to. Right now, this account is relatively straightforward, where it's basically the respective area parcel information and streets, but perhaps we start adding assessed values as symbology. Perhaps we incorporate where fire hydrants are, or we incorporate the voting districts, school districts. You can add a lot more layers as it gets a little bit more visually busy. Utilizing the legend can be really helpful as an end user, just knowing what data exactly you're looking at. And we can turn these off simply by re-clicking on those respective parcels. And if they're grouped together, you can turn all of those on together when they're grouped as such. For the admins in the room, that's something that can be configured in the admin side of things. Now, the other aspect within, and this is all within our layers tile here, we have our layers. Again, we discussed the legend, nothing's selected, so nothing's showing. And then we have our identify tool. The identify tool is the other side of the coin when it comes to our GIS information, because if our layers is that symbology, the visual representation of our data, well, the identify tool is going to allow us to access that specific data specifically. So I like to think of it, this is the way my brain works. I like to think of our identify tool as like we're miners and we're digging for gold. We're digging for precious resources. Well, the first thing, if we're going to set out on a mining expedition, first thing we need to figure out is, what are we digging for? What information do we want to pull out of the imagery, pull out of the earth? And for here, let's go ahead and we're going to select those local parcels here. So now that I've selected what I'm looking for, well, now I need to determine which tool is going to be best suited to extract and pull out, in this case, that parcel data. So we have a box, we have a point, a box, a line, and then the polygon. And we're going to start by taking a single point. And so once we have the layer selected, and then we select our tool, the means of applying that information, notice that now my mouse cursor is that cross. It's kind of that target. That's telling me that the identify tool is activated. And upon clicking on the imagery, wherever I am in the imagery, it's then going to pull up the data, in this case, that parcel data associated with that particular area. So I'm going to click on this structure right here. And when I do so, now it is pulling up that parcel ID number, which I can then copy and paste and place that elsewhere. Now, depending on how the attributes are configured for each respective layer, you might have more information, or it might just be straightforward. Here's the particular parcel number. Again, that can all be configured on the admin side of things. But for here, it's pulling up the information for that specific spot. Now, anytime I wish to kind of reset and run that identify tool again, I'm going to click on the blue button that says new search in the bottom right corner, and now I can conduct another search. So maybe this time, still looking for that parcel data, I'm going to continue at a single point, but I have this buffer tool here, and I'm going to apply a 500-foot buffer. I'm going to click on the imagery, maybe that same property, but now with that 500-foot buffer, now I'm pulling in multiple pieces of information. In this case, 91 to be exact. I've pulled in 91 individual parcels, even ones that are just kind of on the edge, but maybe just gently fall within this radius. They're going to be pulled into this number as well. So if I want to pull up the specific parcel for that, or the parcel number for that particular parcel, I can click on the drop down menu here in my identify tool results, and it's going to illuminate lightly blue on the imagery, showing us which number is associated with which parcel. But notice that when I hover my mouse cursor over the imagery, again, it's that white gloved hand until I start hovering over those results. It turns into a pointer finger. When you see that pointer finger with the results of the identify tool, I can click on that particular parcel and then it's going to show me the number up there as well. So I kind of have two options to engage with that data. I'm going to go ahead, click new search, clear that out. Now this time, instead of using a single point, I want to demonstrate our polygon tool, or our polygon means of applying this identify tool search. But we still have that buffer, and I want to get rid of that 500-foot buffer. That's a sticky setting. There are certain sticky settings in the platform where if we enter some information, it's going to be there until we click delete. So I'm going to get rid of that buffer. And maybe I'm running comps, or maybe I want to get a very specific area of properties I want to compare. Oh, Harry, let me get there. I'm getting there. Hold on. I love it. Love the question. So let me run my polygon tool. Every time I click on the imagery, I'm now creating an endpoint. So every time I click, I'm creating that endpoint. And my goal here is to make a fillable shape. So I don't know if we have any Ghostbuster fans out there, but in Ghostbusters, they say, don't cross the streams. Well, I want you to be like Egon, don't cross the streams. We want this to be an enclosed shape. So now I have my enclosed shape. I'm going to double click. And now using the polygon tool, I was able to break down and get to these 28 respective structures with their particular parcels right here, or that parcel ID number. And in this case, I got 28. Now, getting to that fabulous question Harry threw out to us. Let's say I want to consolidate and have this information. So that rather than, okay, I've got 28 parcels, rather than clicking down and pulling up all that information from within the identify tool, in the middle, it has another of one of those export buttons. But rather than using the export button on the tiles here, whereas this export button will export the imagery, the export button within the results by layer toolbox or data field, this will export those results of the identify tool. So we're going to go ahead and click that CSV, export as a CSV. I'm going to go back to my downloads. Sure enough, here is my parcel data. And then all of the information that is assigned to that GIS layer upon using the identify tool is now accessible in the CSV file, which has been downloaded to my machine, which is going to give me the opportunity to modify, add to this. Maybe we put this on a shared drive amongst colleagues and we can kind of divide and conquer. We could turn this into a mail merge. If your office, if your team has that spreadsheet expert, they're going to love this because it's going to give you that full breadth of capabilities once that's been downloaded. And we can export that through the export CSV option there in the identify tools. Okay. Any other questions when it comes to our GIS tools, most notably our layers or the identify tool? Any question? I'm going to click new search, then click X to close that out. Okay, well, let's keep on going then. So we're going to go to our last place on our tour today. So I'm going to go back to our address. And again, this is still, how did you set the buffer? I don't see that. Sure thing, Jennifer. So when setting that buffer for the layers under the identify tool, we have the layer options to choose from. We have the specific tool, and then in between, that's where we have that buffer. And simply clicking on that and then entering whatever buffer you wish. And then we have the drop down so you can change that unit of measurement as well. And then we'll all be available upon clicking on the layers icon and then clicking the identify tab. Okay. So I'll go back to my address bar. Notice that when I go to my Smart Search address bar, this is still set to search by parcels. And I'm actually going to use a lat long. So I'm going to go back to my default address or lat long. And from there, I'm going to paste my lat long coordinates. And I can either hit enter or click the magnifying glass. And now we are here at a football field in Groveland. And again, I just like minimizing those and going back to my image viewer here. And first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to my obliques because I want to conduct some measurements here at this football field today. When it comes to conducting measurements, those are going to be that very first tile in the very upper right corner. And when we click on that, it's going to display our various toolbox settings here. So I'm going to start by taking a height tool. And if you're not sure what these respective tools are, again, simply hover your mouse cursor over each one. So when we select a tool, we do have the options to change the color, maybe change the line thickness or weight, as well as the relative opacity, how clear we want it to be. And lastly, the unit of measurement. So notice that when I select that height tool, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and maybe I want to measure the height of this structure right here. Notice that because that T, that kind of the target is activated, the tool is turned on, so my mouse cursor is reflected by showing us that T. When conducting a height measurement, pro tip, we're measuring the changes, the difference in elevation data. So we always want to measure from the low point to the high point. So I'm going to click once, and then as I'm moving my mouse cursor, notice that on the imagery, as well as in the upper right corner, it's telling me in real time what that particular measurement is yielding. So I'm at about 16 feet. I'm going to click. And now my measurement is in editing mode. When it's in this editing mode, it's designated by these little nodes here at the beginning and the end. And while in that editing mode, we can change the color, we could change that line thickness, we could change that unit of measurement. Once I'm satisfied with that measurement, I'm going to click on the imagery off of the measurement, and now that's a fixed measurement. And now I can go ahead and maybe conduct a height measurement for this lamppost over here. Double click, no need to edit, click once more, it's a finalized measurement. So as I alluded to a little bit earlier, those of you with experience with Connect Explorer might already have a strong sense or comfort of how to conduct these measurements. It looks and feels a little bit different in this version of our aerial image viewer, but something that you'll pick up, I think, relatively quickly. Now let's switch to our ortho view. Notice when switching to our ortho, those height measurements, they are still there, but now they're just little black dots because we've changed the orientation, and I want to conduct some distance measurements. Now, when we select our distance tool, notice that we do have some advanced features unique to the distance tool, most notably the ground distance and the ground slope. Now, I just want to measure from point A to point B as the crow flies. So I'm just going to leave those unmarked. But perhaps I am preparing for a site for construction, or maybe there's a long winding trail that needs some attending to. In those cases, knowing the distance of the ground, which would factor in those hills, those dips, those dives, it'll factor in the terrain itself, that's where we could use those tools. But for now, I'm just going to measure the length of our football field, and maybe we'll make it a little bit more of a fun color. Again, my mouse cursor is that T. I'm going to click once. I'm going to drag my imagery, and then this should be exactly 300 feet. I can kind of cheat a little bit. Once I'm satisfied, I'm going to double click. It's in the editing mode. Click once more, and that's a finalized measurement. Now, when using the distance tool, I can also, instead of just doing from point A to point B, I could do a single click instead of a double click. And now I can start to get side segment links. Double click. So when I get those side segment links, it'll show me the total entirety of that distance measurement. And then a slightly smaller numbers, it'll tell me that side measurement as well. Now, distance can be measured in the obliques as well. However, I'm just partial to two-dimensional image, best suited for two-dimensional measurements. So maybe now we'll conduct a quick area measurement. When selecting our area tool, we could select conduct the measurement, the area of a polygon or a circle. And we just want to determine what the line color will look like versus that fill color. And then I'm just going to click each time, conducting my area measurement. This is very similar to using the polygon when we are using the identify tool. All right, so two things I just goofed on. One, I overshot my measurement here, and then I didn't even mean to conduct this measurement here. So how do I go about editing or deleting a measurement? So this is a little bit different, but rather intuitive once you get the feel for it. So what I want to do is right now my toolbox is activated because my mouse cursor is that T. I want my mouse cursor to go back to that gloved hand. So I actually just, whenever looking to edit or delete a measurement, I'm going to close out of the measurement entirely. Notice that now our mouse cursor is back to that default gloved hand, but as soon as I hover over an existing measurement or annotation, it turns into a pointer finger. Similarly to when we use the identify tool and there's already a search result hovering over it turns into a pointer finger. By clicking on that measurement with the pointer finger, it brings it back into editing mode. When I'm back into editing mode, I can change the colors, I can change the unit of measurement, and these little nodes, which are going to form at the endpoint and midway point, I can click, hold, move, relocate, or I can take this middle point, pull it out, and create more midpoints to the point you can kind of do it infinitely, where now we can start to measure curvatures. I was working with a construction company, and they were asking, they had a curved porch they were trying to measure, and they didn't see that tool. They were quite flustered. And I just showed them if you keep breaking it down halves enough, patient enough, you can accurately measure that curved porch, which they were able to do. Once we fix our respective measurement, click off of the measurement on the imagery, and now we get that updated, fixed, corrected, edited measurement. Now it's also going to be pulling these measurements back into editing mode, and it's when in editing mode, we have the opportunity to delete that individual measurement. So this was an error. I've got it in editing mode as demonstrated by the little nodes. Click delete, and it's going to delete that individual measurement. Versus if I wish to delete all of my measurements and annotations, I would click delete all. And thankfully, there's this little kind of fail safe, which is saying, are you sure you want to delete all? Which in this case, no, I certainly don't want to. So we've talked about distance, area, and height. I want to show you real quick our static ruler tool. This is a new tool, completely new to cloud. And this actually came about from customer request. So maybe we'll make a nice little red static ruler. And what the static ruler will do is rather than measuring the imagery as is, we can put a static measurement on the imagery itself. So I'm going to put 300 feet because that's the length of the field or the regulation field. We're going to click on it. And now we have our 300-foot ruler. And once it's on the imagery, notice we have these endpoints. We can move those endpoints just like when we were editing our edited measurement. And now we can get that confirmation of that indeed is 300 feet. This is a particularly helpful use case. We were working with a county in Arizona, I believe, might have been New Mexico, and they were installing wind turbines. And they needed to be a certain measurement, about 150 feet apart. And those contractors were using that static ruler to ensure that they were properly spaced out. Now, when this is in editing mode, which I clicked back on, again, we can change that color, and we can also change that unit, that length of measurement near instantaneously. One note about the static ruler is you can only have one applied to the imagery at any given time, but it's flexible, it's adaptable. Harry, appreciate you liking this feature. I think it's really neat. I think it's really cool. That's why I wanted to show it to you today. Again, so those are our measurement tools. And I also want to take a moment to show you our annotation tools, which are that second from the top in our vertically arranged tiles. Annotation tools are going to work very similarly to that of our measurement tools. But instead of conducting measurements, so I'm going to make a polygon, and instead of getting that measurement, I can still kind of draw out this space here. So now we can start to highlight things. And again, it works kind of with the same physics. A single click, double click, it goes into editing mode, clicking off of the measurement or the annotation on the imagery, finalizes it. Then we can do a polygon, a circle, a line, text. And I'm a big fan of the text because we have our 5 different versions of font. But what we can start doing is we can start labeling our imagery using this text. Double click once. In editing mode, it kind of has a little box around it, our little white node, and that's going to allow us to move that respective text, or maybe make it a font that's a little bit easier to see, maybe make it a little bit harder to see, and then click off of the font. And now we are able to apply that text. We can start to label the imagery. When it comes to event planning, planning a future site for construction, the means to annotate and provide text, it seems so simple, but from a functionality standpoint, it opens up so many workflow possibilities. Another one being, another little cool option here you can incorporate is our marker tool. So again, those with prior experience in Connect, you had the joy of using like 3 or 4 dozen different markers. Well, now we've got those same markers, those icons, but now we have like hundreds of them. So many, in fact, that we have an embedded search bar. So maybe I want to find something for parking. All right, I got my little parking icon here. I can select the size, I can select the color. Maybe we'll make it nice bright pink, easy to see. Click on the imagery, and that is my marker in an edited fashion. Just like our other measurements and annotation, it's going to be in editing mode. When in editing mode, we can change the size. I'm going to then click off of the marker on the imagery. Notice how it got a little bit bolder, got a little bit richer. That means it's a finalized marker. So maybe I want to do a little car now. All right, I got my little car icon. Give it a different color. We're going to click once. It's a little bit faded. Click again. Got a little bit bolder. Markers, just like our text annotations, I'm going to close out the toolbox. Back to my gloved hand. Click on the marker. And now I can modify or even delete that individual marker right there. And I'm going to put that car back. That was a cool car. All right. Okay, so notice how this is in editing mode. One is bold, one is faded. The one in editing mode is the one that's currently selected, and I can go ahead and delete that erroneous marker. Last thing I want to show you is we've marked up our imagery. We put some measurements in there. Can you change the orientation of your text and markers? That's a great question, and I believe they do. So let's do that remote right here. So we're going to change the orientation. And there you go. So you'll always have the markers kind of situated so that you can read it. Great question there. So it might be kind of one of those things is as you're marking up your imagery, determining what orientation of imagery is going to make the most sense as you start applying those. You angle them to follow the road. So not sure the exact use case you're suggesting, but we can see that once those markers are applied, they are going to be static. They're going to be placed on the coordinates that we place them on. So if we change the orientation, we change our vantage point, the markers, the text, the annotations will be where we initially place them. So even if you change the orientation, yes, the text and the markers are kind of rotating with the eye, but the actual measurements, and notice even here, like I took this, it kind of looks like these lines are hovering. This box is hovering over that area because I took that area annotation and that top-down vantage point. When it comes to the tools and annotations, kind of the best bet is just practice, tinker, play around with it. I used to be a driving instructor, and I always said, you know, you're only going to learn so much by hearing me talk about it. You're going to really learn this, make it your own. Once you get behind the wheel, take it out yourself. A couple last things I want to show you with our time together. Once we have our imagery marked up, kind of go back to our user layers. Again, anytime we conduct a marker or annotation, we'll be able to kind of view that from here. So this will help you kind of keep track of what you've taken note of. But we have some advanced trainings talking a little bit more about those user layers. But what I really want to show you is once we have our imagery marked up, I'm going to go back to my exporting the imagery. And this time I'm just going to export this as a JPEG. Going to go back to my downloaded imagery here. Yeah, let's pull this into frame. And as we can see, the exact orientation, the zoom level, including all of the markers, measurements, annotations are included on that JPEG as well. So for construction purposes, planning purposes, really easy to identify areas, label it, and then share and distribute with others. All right. Last thing I want to show you today is our 3 dots, because again, my big philosophy is it's great to talk about it. It's great to see it in action, but until you can get behind the wheel and apply this to your own needs, it's not going to do you that great. So underneath our 3 dots, under help, we have some really helpful embedded features, including contact links for technical support, or if you need to reach back out to EagleView forever for any reason. But we also have these various tutorials. So perhaps when I was talking about the identify tool, maybe you went up to get a cup of coffee and you want to kind of reintroduce yourself to the identify tool under those tutorials. Under those 3 dots under help, you're going to get this click by click embedded orientation, which can be a really helpful little reminder is how to apply these respective tools. Okay. That covers the full functionality of the platform. Does anyone have any questions really about EagleView Cloud Explorer? All right. So awesome. Loving to hear the is it available now? If you I'm logged into your account right now. So if you have login credentials, yeah, I'm in your account live right now. Some of the things that we covered, how to navigate and compare that imagery. Again, looking for those tools in the bottom right corner, interacting with that GIS data, be it if it's the symbology or actually pulling out the actual data itself, measuring and annotations. The biggest difference, but still pretty quick, pretty direct to learn. Just kind of keep practicing, just knowing that you're going from live rendering to editing mode to a finalized measurement back into editing mode if and when to change or delete that individual measurement or annotation. And then we talked a little bit about some of those exporting options and possible use cases. Um, should you wish for any additional support, there are a couple links embedded in the platform, but we also encourage you to reach out to eagleview.com/resources. And if you would like any additional follow-up trainings, please feel free to reach out to training@eagleview.com. That covers our time for today. This was a great group, some wonderful questions, some great insights shared. Just want to thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I will be following up. Again, today's training was recorded. I'm going to provide that to Steve with that recording link as well as a survey. Always appreciate your feedback and input. But that does it for my time. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful, and I really hope you find this to be a tool that can really help you in your day-to-day applications. All right, Jennifer, I'm going to include my email here to everybody. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll try to answer those questions for you. Jennifer, it seems like you're having a couple of things. I'm curious to figure out what you're going through. But anyway, thank you for your time. Absolute pleasure. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.